Hi again then guys, and so we've got another Special Projects replica for you today, and I have to say this is one of my favourites of the replicas we've done so far because it comes from one of my favourite racing manufacturers, and it's also just a great car to drive. Now the particular replica is the Chaparral Camaro, which was built for the Trans Am racing series. There are 3 of them built. It's by far one of the lesser known Chaparral models. Many people don't even realise that Chaparral had ever tuned another company's vehicle rather than making their own, but they did, and it's a pretty cool car. And the car that it's based on is the Posse Motorsports Camaro, which is a pre-tuned car. It is pretty expensive, it's 750 grand, but I have to say it really is worth it. To me anyway. So as always, I'll show you first of all what we've done to get the visual look of the car, then we'll go to the garage for the mechanical setup, and finally out to the track to see how it drives. Now, there's not that much that you can actually do to this Camaro visually, but thankfully it already has, like we said, an appropriate look for a Trans Am model. But for the rims, again, you can't really get the exact rims that the real car has on the game. They're kind of, well, they are an old school type of rim. So I've chosen to go for these Enki Baja wheels, which they don't really look like the real ones, but they're pretty much the closest to it. You don't have to go for those, obviously. Those are just the ones I've gone for, and they give it quite an appropriate stance, again, like the period that the car comes from. You cannot fit additional meters on this particular model, and as far as the paint, for the body we've gone for solid colours, and the particular white that I've gone for is Chamonix white. I can't remember at the moment which car that comes from. Obviously different ones of you guys will use a different version of white, or maybe you won't go for white at all, but the reason why I've gone for this particular white is it's kind of an off-white, an old-looking white, which is appropriate to, again, the age of the car and the look of the model. For the rims, these wheels have kind of a dual colour setup, so that no matter what colour you select for them, the centre always stays that kind of greyish silver. But we've gone for Phantom Black for the back section of the rims, which kind of gives it this deep dish racing rim look. And for the brakes, we have gone for the same black, because you don't want the brakes taking away attention from the rest of the car. So that's it for the visual look of this car. Relatively simple setup visually. So now let's go over to the garage for the more important thing, which is the mechanical setup. Now, as with all of these replicas, we of course can't make them exactly like the real car. For one thing, this car has a 6.6 litre V8, whereas the real Trans Am Chaparral Camaro had just over a 300 cubic inch, so it was significantly smaller. That said, this is still very accurate to the specifications of the real Trans Am Chaparral Camaro. So, you want racing soft tyres, obviously. For suspension, we've got the ride height as low as possible, front and rear. Springs, we've got kind of an odd looking setup, but we've increased the rear to 10, and we've actually lowered the front right down to 24.5, which is actually still a very stiff spring setup, because originally it's on something like 40, and you just do not need it that high. Dampers we've got on 5, anti-roll as high as possible on 7, camber only on 2.5, which is reasonably low for a muscle car, which is a good sign. Neutral toe, as always. For the gearbox, the real Camaro has a top speed of around 200, so this is a pretty accurate gear setup. We've got an auto setting of 205. Then for the individual gears, we've rounded those off to 2835, 1885, 1370, 1040, 830 and 685, with a final drive of 3.8. Low initial torque to reduce wheel spin off the line, high acceleration and low braking bias. For the power, we have not fitted any external parts. We do, however, have an oil change, and you do need to bear that in mind depending on how much you'll need to set the power limiter. I've set it to 98.7%, which brings us up to the exact power of the real Trans Am Camaro, which is 475 horses. And for the weight, you want stage 2 weight reduction and the window weight, and then we've got a 187 kilo ballast, and we've put that 22% toward the rear to give us a perfect 50-50 weight split, and also to bring us up to the exact weight of the real Camaro, which is 3,375 pounds or 1,530 kilos. So that's it for the mechanical setup of this car. So now let's finally go to the track to see how it performs. Now I have to say, to be honest, I was expecting this car to be quite a handful to drive, but it's actually one of my favourites of these special project replicas so far. The handling is actually shockingly good. Now it really helps that the car has really a perfect amount of power, and that's not down to me, that's just what the real car had, and the power really does feel perfect. It's got more than enough to make it fast enough, but not so much that you're constantly wrestling with the car. And the handling overall is possibly the best handling muscle car in the game, I would say. It is amazing around corners, and at the same time as being really good, it's also really fun to drive. It has really unique handling. The weight distribution, again, makes it very unique among muscle cars. And overall, I'd say this is, at the very least, one of the most fun replicas I've ever done. In terms of just making this car, it was very fun to build and very fun to test, and I definitely plan on using this car quite a lot. In terms of how competitive it is, well, I haven't raced it, so I can't guarantee anything there, but I feel based on how fast it drives around Laguna Seca and how well it handles, I think it would be a very competitive car, because it certainly is extremely fun to drive, very quick, and it just really has the perfect stance for this replica. So that's it for this build. I hope you guys enjoy this tune, and I'll see you next time. And as always, thanks for watching.